boss.
Hello to all viewers of my channel. You know that old saying, right? What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Well, what if science tells a totally different and way more complicated story? The idea that our early life can actually shape our very biology is exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack the profound and often invisible ways that childhood adversity gets under our skin and can reshape our health for a lifetime. So let's get into the science behind this powerful idea.
To really get a handle on how this connection works, we're not just going to throw a bunch of data at you. Nope. We need to start with a human story, one that brings all this science to life.
So let's talk about Kat. As you can see, her childhood was just shattered by some unimaginable trauma. At only 5 years old, she watched her father murder her mother. By age 8, she had to testify in court, which put her own father behind bars. Her teens and 20s were just a blur of instability, trying to cope with it all. And then, fast forward to age 34, she gets diagnosed with a serious physical illness. Now, on the surface, these events seem totally disconnected, right? I mean, they're decades apart. But are they? How in the world does a childhood horror story turn into a biological disease in adulthood?
Well, that question right there leads us straight into the science of how our experiences literally become our biology. So let's take a look at how the body is actually designed to handle a threat in the first place.
Okay, so our stress response is actually this brilliant survival tool. When your brain spots a threat, you know, the classic tiger in the bushes, it sounds an alarm. Hormones like cortisol flood your system, your heart pounds, your immune system kicks up inflammation, which is basically your body's first responder team rushing to a potential injury. It's fight or flight. But then, once that tiger is gone, this crucial fourth step happens. The system resets. Everything goes back to normal.
And this is the critical point. There's a huge difference between that healthy response and what scientists call toxic stress. For a child like Keat, the tiger is always in the room. The threat isn't short-term, it's chronic. That alarm system never, ever shuts off. So instead of building resilience, this constant state of high alert messes with development and causes some serious long-term wear and tear on the body, keeping inflammation levels dangerously high.
But hold on, you might be thinking, isn't our health pretty much decided by the genes we get from our parents? Is our DNA just our destiny? Well, it turns out the answer is not nearly that simple. The answer is in this fascinating field called epigenetics. I love this analogy. Think of your DNA as the blueprint for a flower. Now, toxic stress doesn't rewrite that blueprint, but it can leave these little chemical smudges all over it. These marks can stop certain genes from being read the right way, which basically prevents the flower from fully blooming. So you see, it's not a change in your genes, it's a change in how your genes work. And that can set you up for illness years or even decades later. Now, I know that all might sound a bit bleak, but this is where the story takes a really hopeful turn. Because just as our biology can be shaped by tough times, it can also be reshaped by healing. The science doesn't just show us the wound, it also points us toward the way forward. The biological reason for all this is something called neuroplasticity. It's this incredible lifelong ability our brains have to form new pathways and new connections. What this means is that the brain that was wired for fight or flight in childhood isn't stuck that way forever. We can actively create new patterns, new responses, and whole new ways of being.
So how do we actually do it? Well, research has given us a whole toolkit of practices that can help rewire that overactive stress response. And these aren't just about feeling better in your head, they create real biological changes in your body. From mindful writing to body-focused therapies, these tools help calm the nervous system and bring down the inflammation that's driving disease.
Let's look at a concrete example. Loving kindness meditation. It's a simple but really profound practice where you systematically send out wishes of safety and well-being. You start with yourself, then you extend it to a loved one, then a neutral person, then even someone you have a hard time with, and finally to all beings everywhere. And what's so cool is the research on this. Studies show that practices like this can measurably reduce the body's inflammatory markers, directly fighting back against the biological effects of toxic stress.
And the internal shift can be just as powerful. Listen to this from a guy named John, whose father was emotionally abusive. Through practicing Tai Chi, a kind of moving meditation, he had this breakthrough. He said, "The voice I heard for so long, my father's voice saying you are not good enough, is just a voice in my head. I realized the only one holding me back from healing was me." Wow, that realization right there was the key that unlocked his entire healing journey.
This whole journey of healing isn't just about us, you know? It's also about making sure these painful patterns don't get passed down to the next generation. It's really about learning how to parent after our own pain, and finally, breaking the cycle.
The famous relationship researcher, Dr. John Gottman, discovered this crucial ratio. For any relationship to thrive, it takes 5 positive interactions to outweigh the damage from just 1 negative one. Why? Well, because our brains are hardwired with a negativity bias to help us survive. They act like Velcro for bad experiences, just clinging to them, while being like Teflon for the good ones, letting them slide right off.
Now that might sound a little daunting, but here's probably the most hopeful message of all. You don't need a perfect childhood to be okay. The research is so clear on this. The presence of just one stable, caring, reliable adult in a child's life can be enough to buffer them from the worst effects of toxic stress. For Kat, the young woman from our first story, this was her grandmother, Jima. She provided that safe harbor and planted the seeds of resilience that would later help her heal.
So, we're left with this question. The science shows us that our past is, in fact, written into our biology. But it also shows us that the story isn't over. Neuroplasticity, resilience, and healing. These things give us the tools to write a brand new chapter. We can't erase the past, but we absolutely can build a future where it no longer defines us.
Subscribe to the channel and like, and also suggest your topics for future videos in the comments.